The dust kicked up beneath Rosa Lawson's boots as she ran through the streets of Fort Bowie, Arizona, her heart hammering against her ribs like a desperate bird trying to escape its cage. It was June 1878, and the scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the adobe buildings and weathered wooden structures that lined the main street. She had hoped never to see her uncle Vernon again after her father's death 3 months ago, but there he was, stepping off the afternoon stage with that same cold calculation in his eyes that had terrified her as a child. Rosa ducked into the general store, pressing her back against the rough wooden wall just inside the doorway. Through the window, she watched Vernon Lawson survey the town with the air of a man who owned everything he saw. At 22, Rosa had thought she was finally free. Her father had left her the small ranch on the outskirts of Fort Bowie, a modest piece of land with enough cattle to make a living if she worked hard. She had been managing it these past months with the help of 2 ranch hands her father had trusted. It was not much, but it was hers, and she had never felt more alive than when she watched the sunrise over her own land. But Vernon had other plans. She had received his letter 2 weeks ago, written in that sharp, angular script that looked like it could cut paper. He claimed that as her only living male relative, he had the legal right to manage her affairs. The word manage had made her blood run cold. She knew what it really meant. Vernon saw her as property, just another asset to be controlled and exploited. The bell above the store's door chimed as another customer entered. Rosa glanced over and felt her breath catch. Isaac Bennett stood in the doorway, his tall frame backlit by the afternoon sun. He was one of the most respected cowboys in the territory, known for his fair dealings and his unwillingness to tolerate injustice. She had met him only twice before, once when he had sold some horses to her father, and again at her father's funeral where he had offered his quiet condolences. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. Isaac removed his hat and nodded to the shopkeeper before his gaze landed on Rosa. Something flickered across his face, concern perhaps, as he took in her obvious distress. "Miss Lawson," he said, his voice low and steady, "you look like you have seen a ghost." Rosa managed a trembling smile. "Something like that, Mr. Bennett. My uncle just arrived on the stage." Isaac's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Vernon Lawson? You know of him?" "I know his reputation." Isaac moved closer, his presence somehow both calming and electric. "Your father spoke of him once, said he was a man who measured everything in dollars and never understood the value of anything that could not be bought or sold." Rosa felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "He wants to take my ranch. Says that as a woman I cannot manage it properly. Says he has a legal right to oversee my inheritance." The muscle in Isaac's jaw worked for a moment. "Does he now?" Before Rosa could respond, the shop door burst open with enough force to make the bell clang violently. Vernon Lawson stood in the entrance, his expensive Eastern suit already dusty from the Arizona heat. He was a portly man with thinning hair slicked back with too much pomade, and his eyes swept the store until they landed on Rosa. "There you are, girl," Vernon said, not quite shouting, but speaking loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "I have been looking all over this wretched town for you. We have business to discuss." Rosa lifted her chin. "I have nothing to discuss with you, Uncle Vernon. My father left the ranch to me, and I intend to keep it." Vernon's face reddened. "Your father was a sentimental fool who did not understand the law. You are an unmarried woman, Rosa. You have no business trying to run a ranch on your own. I am your guardian now, whether you like it or not. You and everything you own belong under my authority." The word belong hit Rosa like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to protest, but Isaac stepped forward, positioning himself between Rosa and her uncle. The movement was smooth and deliberate, and suddenly the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees despite the desert heat. "Try it," Isaac said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of absolute conviction. Vernon's eyes widened slightly as he took in Isaac's full measure. Isaac was lean and tall, his body honed by years of hard work under the brutal Arizona sun. There was nothing aggressive in his posture, but there was something utterly immovable about him, like a boulder planted in the middle of a stream. "This is none of your concern, Cowboy," Vernon said, trying to inject authority into his voice. "This is a family matter." "Miss Lawson looks like she disagrees with your assessment of the situation," Isaac replied evenly. "And from where I am standing, it seems like she does not want your help or your authority." Vernon's face had gone from red to nearly purple. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have lawyers, connections. I can make trouble for anyone who interferes with my legal rights." "Legal rights?" Rosa found her voice again, strengthened by Isaac's presence. "You have not seen or spoken to me in 10 years, Uncle Vernon. You did not come to Father's funeral. You only showed up now because you heard about the ranch." "A ranch you are running into the ground," Vernon shot back. "I heard you only have 2 hands left. Your father had 5. You are losing money, losing cattle. Within a year, you will have nothing. I am trying to save you from yourself." "The ranch is doing fine," Rosa said, though she knew it was only partly true. The past months had been difficult, and she had indeed lost some cattle to rustlers, but she was learning, adapting. She just needed more time. Vernon stepped forward, trying to move around Isaac, but Isaac shifted smoothly, maintaining his position between them. "Miss Lawson has asked you to leave," Isaac said. "I suggest you respect her wishes." For a moment the 2 men stared at each other, and Rosa held her breath. Then Vernon took a step back, his expression twisting into something ugly. "This is not over," he said. "Not by a long shot. I will be back with the territorial marshal and proper documents. We will see how defiant you feel then, Rosa. And you," he turned his glare on Isaac, "you will regret interfering in matters that do not concern you." Vernon turned on his heel and stormed out of the store, leaving a wake of tension behind him. Rosa realized she was shaking and pressed her palm against the counter to steady herself. Isaac turned to face her, his expression softening. "Are you all right, Miss Lawson?" "I do not know," Rosa admitted. He sounded very certain. What if he really can take the ranch? What if the law is on his side? Isaac was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I know a lawyer in Tucson. Good man, honest. Specializes in property law and inheritance disputes. His name is Martin Guthrie. If anyone can help you navigate this, he can." "I do not have much money for lawyers," Rosa said quietly. "Let me worry about that for now," Isaac said. "First thing tomorrow, we will ride to Tucson and talk to Martin. It is a 2-day ride there and back, but it is worth it to know exactly where you stand." Rosa looked up at him, searching his face. "Why are you helping me? You barely know me." Isaac's expression was serious. "Your father was a good man. He gave me a fair shake when others would not. And beyond that," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "I do not abide men who think they can claim ownership over other people. Your uncle talks about you like you are livestock or furniture. That does not sit right with me." Something warm bloomed in Rosa's chest, a feeling she had not experienced in the long, lonely months since her father's death. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I cannot tell you what it means to have someone stand up for me like that." "Call me Isaac," he said, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a slight smile. "If we are going to be traveling to Tucson together, we should probably be on a first-name basis." "Rosa," she replied, and found herself returning his smile despite everything. They made their plans quickly. Isaac would come to her ranch at dawn, and they would begin the journey to Tucson. Rosa would bring whatever papers she had regarding her father's will and the ranch deed. In the meantime, Isaac suggested she stay at the ranch rather than in town, where Vernon could more easily cause trouble. As Rosa rode back to her property that evening, she felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. The confrontation with Vernon had been terrifying, but Isaac's intervention had stirred something in her. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of the ranch and her grief by herself. To have someone stand beside her, someone who asked for nothing in return, felt almost miraculous. The ranch house was small but well built. constructed from adobe with a sturdy wooden roof that her father had reinforced just before he died. Her two remaining ranch hands, old Miguel and his nephew Esteban, were working in the corral when she arrived. They had been loyal to her father for years, and they had stayed on despite reduced wages while Rosa figured out how to make the ranch profitable again. "Señorita," Miguel called out, waving. "There was a man here earlier, a fat man in a fancy suit. He said he was your uncle." Rosa's stomach sank. What did he want? He was looking around, asking questions about the cattle count, the water rights, how much you pay us. We told him nothing, but he walked all over the property like he owned it. Esteban asked him to leave, but he said he would come back whenever he pleased. Rosa clenched her fists. Vernon was already trying to build a case against her, gathering evidence of mismanagement or financial trouble. "Thank you for not telling him anything. Tomorrow morning, I am riding to Tucson with Isaac Bennett. We are going to see a lawyer." Miguel's weathered face brightened. "Señor Bennett, that is good. He is a good man, an honest man. You can trust him." That night, Rosa barely slept. She kept hearing Vernon's voice in her head. The casual way he had said she and everything she owned belonged under his authority. The words made her feel sick and furious in equal measure. Her father had worked his entire life to build something he could pass on to her. He had taught her to rope and brand cattle, to mend fences, to read the weather and the land. He had never treated her like she was less capable because she was a woman. And now Vernon wanted to sweep in and take it all away, to reduce her to a piece of property to be managed. But then she thought of Isaac, the way he had stepped between them without hesitation, the quiet steel in his voice when he said those two simple words, "Try it," as if daring Vernon to test him, as if he would not move an inch no matter what threats or legal documents Vernon might produce. Rosa rose before dawn and, dressed in her riding clothes, sturdy trousers, and a cotton shirt that had once belonged to her father. She braided her dark hair and tucked it under her hat, then gathered all the papers she could find related to the ranch. Her father's will was simple and clear. He left everything to his daughter, Rosa Marie Lawson. There was no mention of Vernon, no provision for male guardianship. Isaac arrived just as the sun was beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. He rode a strong bay horse and led a second mount, a gray mare with gentle eyes. "Thought your horse might appreciate the break," Isaac said. "This is Lily. She has a smooth gait and a steady temperament, good for long rides." Rosa felt touched by the thoughtfulness. Her own horse was a bit temperamental and not ideal for a hard 2-day journey. "Thank you. That's very kind." They set out as the day began to heat up, heading southwest toward Tucson. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scattered sagebrush, with mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Rosa found herself stealing glances at Isaac. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. There was something calming about his presence, a sense of capability and groundedness that made her feel safe. "Tell me about your father," Isaac said after a while. "He seemed like a good man, but I only knew him slightly." Rosa smiled, the grief still fresh but tinged with warmth at the memories. "He was the best man I ever knew. He lost my mother when I was just a baby, some kind of fever that swept through the territory. He raised me by himself, never remarried. He used to say that my mother was the only woman who could ever capture his heart. And when she died, she took it with her." "That is a hard way to live," Isaac said quietly. "I think in some ways it was," Rosa agreed. "But he had me and he had the ranch, and that seemed to be enough for him. He taught me everything he knew. We would ride out together every morning to check the herd, and he would point out things about the land, about the cattle, about the weather. He wanted me to be able to stand on my own 2 feet, to not need anyone." "He did a good job," Isaac said, and there was approval in his voice. "You have kept the ranch going these past months. That is not easy for anyone, man or woman." Rosa felt a flush of pride mixed with frustration. "But not well enough, apparently. Vernon is right that I lost cattle. There were rustlers last month. They took nearly 20 head before Miguel and Esteban could stop them. and I had to let 3 of the hands go because I could not afford to pay them all through the winter. Rustlers are a problem for every ranch in the territory, Isaac said firmly, and letting hands go when money is tight is just good business sense. Your uncle is looking for excuses, Rosa. He would find fault no matter what you did. They rode on, stopping at midday to water the horses and eat the provisions Rosa had packed. As they sat in the shade of a large boulder, Isaac told her about his own past. He had grown up in Texas, the son of a rancher who had lost everything in the financial panic of 1873. The family had moved west looking for a fresh start, but his parents had both succumbed to cholera shortly after arriving in Arizona. Isaac had been 20 years old, alone and grieving, with nothing but his horse and his skills as a cowhand. I understand what it is like, he said, looking out at the horizon. Losing your parents, having to figure out how to survive on your own. It makes you strong, but it is a lonely kind of strength. Rosa felt a connection click into place, a recognition of shared pain and resilience. How did you build yourself back up? Slowly, Isaac said with a slight smile. I worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved every penny. Then I started buying horses, training them, selling them. I have a small place now, nothing fancy, but it is mine. And I have learned that the people you choose to trust matter more than anything. A few good friends are worth more than all the gold in California. As the afternoon wore on, they talked about everything and nothing. Rosa found herself laughing more than she had in months, charmed by Isaac's dry wit and the stories he told about mishaps on the trail and stubborn horses and the various colorful characters who populated the territory. He listened when she spoke. Really listened. Asking questions that showed he cared about her answers. They made camp that evening beside a small creek, the water a precious find in the arid landscape. Isaac built a fire while Rosa tended to the horses, and they cooked a simple meal of beans and cornbread. As the stars began to emerge overhead, countless and brilliant in the clear desert sky, Rosa felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since before her father's death. Isaac, she said softly, watching the flames dance. Thank you for doing this, for helping me. I know you have your own work, your own life. This is costing you time and money. Isaac looked at her across the fire, his expression serious. I will not lie and say this is purely selfless, Rosa. Her heart skipped. What do you mean? I mean that helping you is not a burden. It is the opposite. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. When I saw you in that store yesterday, looking so scared but still standing tall, still defiant, something shifted in me. And when your uncle spoke about you like you were his property to claim, I knew I would do whatever it took to make sure he never got his hands on you or your ranch. Rosa could not seem to find her voice. The firelight cast shadows across Isaac's face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. I know we barely know each other, Isaac continued, and I know this is not the time or place for such talk with everything you are dealing with. But I wanted you to know that my interest in your well-being is not just about justice or honoring your father's memory. It is about you. Rosa felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. I am glad, she managed to say. I am glad it is about me, because I feel it too, this connection between us. I have felt it since you stepped between Vernon and me. Maybe even before that, when you came to my father's funeral and said those kind words, I remember thinking that you were the sort of man my father would have wanted me to know. Isaac's expression softened into something warm and hopeful. We will get through this situation with your uncle, he said, and when we do, when the ranch is secure and the threat is past, I would like to court you properly, if you would allow it. Rosa smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes for an entirely different reason than fear. I would like that very much. They reached Tucson the following afternoon, dusty and saddle-sore, but in good spirits. The town was larger than Fort Bowie, with proper brick buildings and paved streets in the center. Isaac led them to a modest office on a quiet side street, where a sign proclaimed Martin Guthrie, attorney at law. The lawyer was a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened carefully as Rosa explained the situation, examining the will and ranch deed she had brought. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers thoughtfully. "Your father's will is very clear," Martin said. "He left everything to you with no conditions or provisions for a guardian. However, your uncle is likely relying on territorial laws regarding unmarried women and property management. Some judges do grant male relatives authority over estates if they can prove the woman in question is mismanaging the property." Rosa's heart sank. "So he might succeed?" "He might try," Martin said. "But I do not think he will succeed if we present this properly. You have been managing the ranch for 3 months with reasonable success. Yes, you have faced challenges, but so does every rancher. The key is to demonstrate that you have a solid plan for the ranch's future, that you are competent and capable, and that your uncle's true motivation is financial gain, not your well-being." "How do we do that?" Isaac asked. Martin smiled. "We gather statements from people who can attest to Miss Lawson's character and capabilities. Ranch hands, neighbors, business associates in Fort Bowie. We document the ranch's finances to show that while things are tight, they are not disastrous, and we prepare for the possibility that your uncle will try to petition the territorial court for guardianship. If he does, we will be ready to fight it." They spent the next several hours going over the details, with Martin taking copious notes and giving Rosa advice on what records to keep and what steps to take. By the time they left his office, Rosa felt armed with knowledge and strategy, though the worry still gnawed at her. The ride back to Fort Bowie seemed shorter somehow, perhaps because Rosa spent much of it talking with Isaac about the future. They discussed possibilities for the ranch, ways to improve efficiency and security. Isaac offered to help her repair some of the older fencing and suggested she consider investing in a few breeding bulls to improve her herd quality. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Rosa found herself imagining not just surviving, but actually thriving. When they finally reached her ranch on the 3rd day, Miguel ran out to meet them with alarming news. Vernon had been back twice, each time with different men, asking more questions and making threats. He had gone into town and started spreading rumors that Rosa was incompetent and that the ranch was failing. He had even visited the bank and tried to get information about her father's accounts. "He is moving fast," Isaac said grimly. "He wants to build his case before you can mount a defense." Rosa felt anger surge through her, burning away the fear. "Then we move faster. Miguel, Esteban, I need you both to write down everything you know about how the ranch has been run since my father died." "Isaac, you said you knew other ranchers in the area who respected my father?" "Several," Isaac confirmed. "Then we need to visit them, get their statements of support, and we need to document every single asset and expense of this ranch so thoroughly that there will be no question about my management." Over the next 2 weeks, Rosa worked harder than she ever had in her life. With Isaac's help, she visited every neighbor and business contact within a day's ride. Most were supportive, some enthusiastically so. Old Bill Crawford, who owned the largest spread in the area, was particularly vocal in his defense of Rosa. "Your pa was one of the best men I knew," Bill told her, his voice gruff with emotion. "And you are his daughter through and through. Any fool can see you are running that ranch just fine. If your uncle tries to take it from you, he will have to answer to every honest rancher in this territory." But not everyone was supportive. Some of the older, more conservative ranchers believed that a woman had no business running a ranch alone. A few even told her frankly that she should accept her uncle's authority and be grateful he was willing to take on the responsibility. Those conversations stung. But Isaac was always there to remind her that the opinions of closed-minded men did not define her worth or capabilities. During those 2 weeks, Rosa and Isaac grew closer than she would have thought possible in such a short time. He spent almost every day at her ranch, helping with work, but also just being present, a steady and comforting force. They shared meals and conversation, and slowly, Rosa felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Isaac reached over and took her hand. The gesture was simple but electric, sending warmth racing through her entire body. "Whatever happens with your uncle," Isaac said quietly, "you will not face it alone. I want you to know that." Rosa squeezed his hand, feeling tears well up. "I have been alone for so long," she whispered. "Even before my father died, I was alone in many ways. He loved me, but he was always preparing me to survive without him. He never wanted me to rely on anyone, but this, having you here, having someone to share the burden with, it makes everything feel less impossible." Isaac turned to face her, his expression intense. "You do not have to be alone anymore, Rosa. Not unless you want to be." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. They sat like that as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear, neither speaking but both feeling the profound rightness of the moment. The peace was shattered 3 days later when Vernon returned, this time with the territorial marshal and a sheaf of legal documents. Rosa was in the barn when Miguel came running to get her, his face pale with worry. "Señorita, your uncle is here with the law. He has papers." Rosa's stomach dropped, but she squared her shoulders and walked out to face them. Vernon stood in the yard looking triumphant, flanked by Marshal Davis, a stern-faced man Rosa knew only by reputation. "Miss Lawson," the marshal said, tipping his hat, "your uncle has filed a petition with the territorial court for legal guardianship over you and your estate. I am here to serve you with these documents and to inform you that a hearing has been scheduled for 2 weeks from today in Tucson." Rosa took the papers with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the legal language. It was worse than she had feared. Vernon was not just claiming guardianship, he was claiming that she was mentally and emotionally unfit to manage her own affairs, that she had squandered her father's legacy through negligence and poor judgment. "This is a lie," Rosa said, her voice shaking with fury. "Every word of this is a lie." "That will be for the judge to decide," Vernon said smoothly. "I am only trying to protect what is left of your father's estate before you run it completely into the ground. This is for your own good, Rosa." "My own good?" Rosa's voice rose. "You do not care about my good. You care about my land and my cattle and what you can sell them for." "Careful, niece," Vernon said, his eyes hardening. "Emotional outbursts like this only prove my point about your instability." Rosa felt rage boil over, and she stepped forward with her fists clenched. But before she could say or do something she might regret, Isaac appeared at her side. She had not even heard him ride up, but suddenly he was there, solid and unmovable. "Marshal," Isaac said calmly, "I trust you will be attending the hearing as an impartial witness to ensure all parties receive fair treatment under the law?" Marshal Davis looked between Isaac and Vernon, his expression unreadable. "That is not typically my role, but I suppose I could attend if Miss Lawson wishes it." "I do," Rosa said immediately. Vernon's face reddened. "This cowboy has been interfering in family business for weeks now. He has no standing in this matter." "I have exactly as much standing as Miss Lawson wishes to give me," Isaac replied evenly, "and from where I stand, it looks like she needs someone to ensure her rights are protected against false accusations and opportunistic relatives." The marshal cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I have served the papers. The rest will be settled at the hearing. Good day, Miss Lawson." After they left, Rosa felt her legs go weak. Isaac caught her elbow, steadying her. "Come on," he said gently. "Let us go inside and read through these documents properly." They spent the evening going over every word of Vernon's petition, and the more Rosa read, the angrier she became. Vernon had twisted every difficulty into evidence of incompetence. The cattle lost to rustlers became proof she could not protect the ranch. The hands she had let go became evidence of financial mismanagement. He even claimed that her unmarried status at 22 proved she was socially maladjusted and unable to make sound decisions. "It is all twisted," Rosa said, slamming the papers down on the table. "He is taking the normal challenges any rancher faces and using them against me." "I know," Isaac said, "but Martin will help us counter every point. We have statements from your neighbors, your accounts are in order, and anyone with eyes can see you are perfectly capable." What if that is not enough? Rosa asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if the judge decides that because I am an unmarried woman, Vernon has the right to control my life? Isaac was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, but firm. There is one way to remove any question about your status as an unmarried woman. Rosa looked up at him, her heart beginning to pound. What do you mean? Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Rosa's mouth went dry. Isaac, I cannot ask you to do that. To marry me just to save my ranch, that would not be fair to you. Isaac reached across the table and took both her hands in his. You are not asking, I am offering. And it would not be just to save your ranch, Rosa. I told you weeks ago that I wanted to court you properly. I meant it. I care about you deeply. These past weeks, working alongside you, talking with you, watching you fight for what is yours, I have fallen in love with you. Rosa felt tears spill down her cheeks. Isaac, I love you too. But this is so fast and under such terrible circumstances. What if you regret it later? What if you feel trapped? Isaac stood and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair. I will not feel trapped. I will feel lucky. Rosa, I have never met anyone like you. You are strong and brave and brilliant. You make me laugh and you make me think. When I imagine my future, you are in every part of it. So yes, the timing is rushed and the circumstances are not romantic, but my feelings are real. Marry me. Marry me and we will face your uncle and the judge and whatever comes next together. Rosa looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and love. She thought about the past weeks, about the way Isaac had stood by her without hesitation, the way he had helped without being asked, the way he had made her feel seen and valued. She thought about the connection between them, the easy conversations and shared laughter and the comfortable silences. And she knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to spend her life with this man. Yes, she whispered, yes, I will marry you. Isaac's face broke into a smile so bright it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Rosa buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry, releasing weeks of tension and fear and loneliness. When she finally pulled back, Isaac wiped her tears away with his thumb. We will do this properly, he said. Tomorrow we will go to town and talk to Reverend Mitchell. We will get married with our friends as witnesses, and then when we go to that hearing, you will be Rosa Bennett, a married woman with a husband to stand beside her, and Vernon will have no legal ground to stand on. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Fort Bowie. Rosa wore a simple blue dress that had belonged to her mother, preserved all these years in a trunk. Miguel and Esteban served as witnesses, along with several neighboring ranchers and their wives who had come to show their support. Isaac wore a clean shirt and his best vest, and when Rosa walked down the aisle toward him, the look in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Reverend Mitchell pronounced them man and wife, and Isaac kissed her gently in front of everyone, Rosa felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was not how she had imagined her wedding as a girl, rushed and motivated by legal necessity, but it felt real and true, nonetheless. Vernon, of course, heard about the marriage within hours. He appeared at the ranch that evening, his face purple with rage. You conniving little witch, he spat at Rosa. You think this changes anything? You think marrying some cowboy will protect you? Isaac stepped forward, his expression hard. You need to leave, now. This is private property, and you are not welcome here. This is a sham marriage, Vernon said. Nothing but a transparent attempt to circumvent the law. I will make sure the judge knows it. The judge will know that Miss Lawson, now Mrs. Bennett, is a married woman whose property rights are protected by her marriage, Isaac said coldly. Your petition for guardianship is now moot. You have no claim on her or her property. We will see about that, Vernon hissed. I still have the hearing scheduled. I will prove this marriage is fraudulent. I will prove you married her for her land. You will prove nothing because there is nothing to prove, Rosa said, finding her voice. Isaac and I married because we love each other. The timing may have been influenced by your threats, but our feelings are real. Now get off my property before I have the marshal remove you for trespassing." Vernon left, but his threats left a sour taste. Rosa and Isaac consulted with Martin Guthrie again, and the lawyer assured them that the marriage did indeed change Rosa's legal status significantly. However, he warned that if Vernon could somehow prove the marriage was fraudulent or coerced, a judge might still grant him some authority. "The best defense," Martin said, "is to show the court that this is a genuine marriage based on genuine affection. Testimony from friends, evidence that you had a relationship before the legal troubles began. Anything that demonstrates this was not simply a legal maneuver." The 2 weeks leading up to the hearing were strange and wonderful. Isaac moved into the ranch house, and they settled into married life with surprising ease. In public, they maintained the careful appearance of propriety, but in private, their relationship deepened. They talked late into the night about their dreams and fears, their pasts, and their hopes for the future. Isaac was patient and gentle, never pressing for more than Rosa was ready to give. One night, about a week after their wedding, they lay in bed together with the windows open to let in the cool night air. Rosa rested her head on Isaac's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Marrying me like this under these circumstances?" Isaac's arms tightened around her. "Not for a single second, do you?" "No," Rosa said, and she realized it was the absolute truth. "I thought I might, or that it would feel wrong somehow, like we had rushed into something we were not ready for. But it feels right. You feel right." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "When all this business with your uncle is settled, I want to take you on a proper honeymoon. Maybe to California, to see the ocean. Would you like that?" Rosa smiled against his chest. "I would love that. I have never seen the ocean." "Neither have I," Isaac admitted. "We will see it together for the first time." The day of the hearing arrived with a cloudless sky and oppressive heat. Rosa and Isaac rode to Tucson accompanied by Miguel, Esteban, and 3 neighboring ranchers who had insisted on coming to offer support and testimony. They met Martin Guthrie outside the courthouse, and he reviewed their strategy one final time. "Remember," he said, "stay calm, answer questions honestly, and do not let Vernon or his lawyer provoke you into an emotional response. We have a strong case." The courtroom was smaller than Rosa had expected, a simple room with wooden benches and a raised platform for the judge. Vernon sat at one table with a sharp-looking lawyer in an expensive suit. Rosa and Isaac sat at another table with Martin between them. Judge Thornton was a gray-haired man with a weathered face and shrewd eyes. He called the court to order and reviewed the petition before him. "Mr. Lawson," the judge said, "your petition requests guardianship over your niece on the grounds that she is unfit to manage her inherited property. However, I see from the documents filed that Miss Rosa Lawson is now Mrs. Rosa Bennett, married as of 3 weeks ago. Can you explain why this petition should proceed given this change in circumstances?" Vernon's lawyer, a man named Whitmore, stood. "Your Honor, we believe the marriage is fraudulent, entered into solely to avoid our client's legitimate guardianship claim. We have evidence that Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Bennett barely knew each other before the petition was filed, and that they married within days of being served with the guardianship documents." Judge Thornton looked at Martin. "How do you respond?" Martin stood. "Your Honor, while it is true that the marriage occurred shortly after the guardianship petition was filed, the relationship between Mr. and Mrs. Bennett began weeks before any legal action was taken. Furthermore, the motivation for marriage is irrelevant. Mrs. Bennett is now a married woman, and under territorial law, her husband has the legal right to assist her in managing her property. There is no basis for a guardianship claim against a married woman." The judge nodded slowly. "I am inclined to agree, but I will hear testimony before making a final ruling. Mr. Whitmore, call your first witness." The next hour was grueling. Vernon testified that Rosa had always been impulsive and emotional, that she had no business sense, that the ranch was falling apart under her management. He painted a picture of a foolish young woman playing at ranching while squandering her inheritance. His lawyer presented financial records showing the decline in the ranch's profitability since her father's death. But when Martin cross-examined Vernon, cracks began to appear in his story. Martin established that Vernon had not visited Rosa or her father in 10 years, that he knew nothing about the actual day-to-day operation of the ranch, and that his information came solely from gossip and supposition. "Mr. Lawson," Martin said, "is it not true that you operate a land speculation business in Santa Fe?" "I am a businessman, yes," Vernon said stiffly. "And is it not true that you have purchased several properties from families in financial distress, often at well below market value?" "I provide a service to people who need quick capital," Vernon said, "and you stand to profit handsomely if you gain control of your niece's ranch, do you not? The land alone is worth several $1,000s, to say nothing of the cattle and equipment." Vernon's face reddened. "I am trying to help my niece." "By taking away everything her father left her?" Martin's voice was sharp. "No further questions, Your Honor." Then it was time for Rosa and Isaac to testify. Rosa spoke clearly about her father's training, about the work she had done to keep the ranch running, about the challenges she had faced, and how she had overcome them. She admitted to the difficulties with rustlers and finances, but explained the steps she had taken to address them. When Vernon's lawyer tried to paint her as incompetent, she faced him squarely. "My father believed I could run this ranch, Mr. Whitmore. He left it to me because he knew I was capable. I have made mistakes, yes, but I have also learned and adapted. The ranch is not failing. It is growing stronger every day." Isaac testified about his relationship with Rosa, about the respect he had for her capabilities, about the work they had done together to secure the ranch's future. When asked if he had married her for her property, he looked the lawyer dead in the eye and said, "I married her because I love her. The ranch is hers, not mine. I am just grateful she chose to share her life with me." Miguel, Esteban, and the neighboring ranchers all testified to Rosa's character and competence. Old Bill Crawford was particularly effective, his gruff voice carrying weight in the courtroom. "I have been ranching in this territory for 30 years, Bill said. "I have seen men twice Rosa Bennett's age fail at what she is accomplishing. She is smart, hardworking, and honest. If her uncle gets control of that ranch, it will be a miscarriage of justice." Finally, after hours of testimony, Judge Thornton called for a recess to review the evidence. Rosa and Isaac waited in the hallway, hands clasped tightly together. Vernon paced at the other end of the hall, his lawyer speaking to him in low tones. When the judge called them back in, his expression was unreadable. Rosa felt her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it. "I have reviewed the petition, the testimony, and the evidence presented," Judge Thornton said. "Mr. Lawson, I find your concerns about your niece's management of her property to be largely unfounded and based on speculation rather than fact. The financial challenges Mrs. Bennett has faced are common to ranching operations throughout the territory and do not indicate incompetence or mismanagement." Rosa felt a wave of relief so strong it made her dizzy. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mrs. Bennett is now a married woman. Under territorial law, her husband has the right and responsibility to assist her in managing property and financial matters. There is no legal basis for a guardianship claim against a married woman, regardless of the circumstances of her marriage. While the timing of the marriage may be convenient, I've seen no evidence that it is fraudulent or coerced. To the contrary, the testimony suggests a genuine relationship based on mutual respect and affection." Vernon stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. She is manipulating the system." "Sit down, Mr. Lawson," Judge Thornton said sharply. "I am not finished. I am denying your petition for guardianship in its entirety. Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay the court costs and Mrs. Bennett's legal fees. Your attempt to seize control of your niece's property appears motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern for her welfare. I suggest you return to Santa Fe and leave Mrs. Bennett and her husband to manage their own affairs." The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, and just like that, it was over. Rosa felt tears stream down her face as Isaac pulled her into his arms. Martin was grinning broadly, shaking their hands and accepting congratulations from their supporters. Vernon stormed out of the courtroom without a word, his lawyer hurrying after him. Rosa caught a glimpse of her uncle's face as he left, twisted with fury and humiliation, and she felt a fierce surge of triumph. He had tried to take everything from her, and he had failed. The ride back to Fort Bowie was filled with celebration and laughter. Their supporters talked animatedly about the hearing, about Vernon's defeat, about the future of the ranch. But Rosa mostly just held on to Isaac, grateful beyond words for this man who had stood by her without hesitation. When they finally arrived home, the sun was setting in brilliant streaks of red and gold. Miguel and Esteban took the horses, giving the newlyweds knowing smiles as they headed to the house. Inside, Rosa and Isaac stood in the main room, suddenly alone and overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "We did it," Rosa said wonderingly. "We actually did it. The ranch is safe." "You did it," Isaac corrected gently. "You fought for what was yours. I just stood beside you." Rosa shook her head. "You did more than that. You gave me the strength to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. You believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself. And you married me, Isaac. You tied your life to mine to protect me." Isaac cupped her face in his hands, his expression tender. "I tied my life to yours because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The legal protection was just a bonus. Rosa, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Coming home to you every evening, working beside you during the day, talking with you late into the night, it is everything I never knew I wanted." Rosa reached up and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude and relief into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I know our marriage started in unusual circumstances," he said quietly, "but I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that my love is real. I want to build a future with you, Rosa. A real future, not just a legal arrangement." "I want that too," Rosa whispered. "I love you, Isaac. Not because you saved my ranch, but because of who you are, because you are kind and strong and honest, because you make me laugh and you make me feel safe, because when I look at you, I see home." That night, their marriage became real in every sense. And in the months that followed, Rosa and Isaac built a life together that exceeded both their expectations. The ranch began to thrive under their joint management. Isaac's expertise with horses combined with Rosa's knowledge of cattle created a profitable diversification. They expanded slowly but steadily, hiring back the hands Rosa had let go and eventually adding more. Vernon never returned to Fort Bowie. Rosa heard through mutual acquaintances that he had left the territory entirely, moving to California to pursue other business ventures. She felt nothing but relief at his absence, grateful that she would never have to face him again. A year after their marriage, Rosa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy and a little bit of terror. Isaac became almost comically overprotective, trying to prevent Rosa from doing any heavy work on the ranch. Rosa, amused and touched by his concern, had to remind him that pregnant women had been running ranches for generations. Their son was born in the spring of 1880, a healthy baby boy with Isaac's gray eyes and Rosa's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Rosa's father. Holding her son for the first time, with Isaac's arm around her shoulders, Rosa felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. Over the next several years, their family grew. A daughter, Clara, arrived 2 years after Thomas. Then another son, James, 2 years after that. The ranch house, which had seemed so empty after Rosa's father died, was now filled with the noise and chaos of children. Isaac proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching their children about the land and the animals with the same care Rosa's father had shown her. He never once suggested that their daughters were less capable than their sons, insisting that all of them learn to ride, to rope, to handle the responsibilities of ranch life. Rosa sometimes thought about that day in the general store in Fort Bowie when Isaac had stepped between her and Vernon and said those two simple words, "Try it." That moment had changed the entire trajectory of her life. If Isaac had not been there, if he had not stood up for her, she might have lost everything. But more than that, she would have missed out on this beautiful life they had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised her with a trip to California, finally making good on his promise to show her the ocean. They left the children with Miguel and his wife and rode west, retracing the journey they had made to Tucson all those years ago, but this time continuing onto the coast. The first time Rosa saw the Pacific Ocean, stretching endless and blue to the horizon, she cried. Isaac held her hand as they walked along the beach, the waves washing over their feet. "Was it worth the wait?" Isaac asked, smiling at her reaction. "It is more beautiful than I imagined," Rosa said. "But you know what the best part is?" "What?" "Seeing it with you. Everything is better with you, Isaac. Even the things I dreamed about before I knew you, they are better because you are here to share them with me." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her there on the beach with the sound of the waves in the background. "I love you, Rosa Bennett. I loved you from the moment I saw you in that store standing up to a man who tried to claim you as property. And I will love you until the day I die." They returned to Fort Bowie renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And there were challenges, of course, droughts and harsh winters, difficult cattle sales, and the occasional outbreak of disease. But through it all, Rosa and Isaac faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Thomas grew up to be a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Isaac and Rosa grew older. Clara, spirited and independent like her mother, married a neighboring rancher's son and started her own spread just a few miles away. James, the youngest, decided to become a lawyer, inspired by Martin Guthrie, who remained a family friend until his death. As Rosa entered her 50s, she often sat on the porch in the evenings with Isaac, watching the sun set over the land her father had left her, the land she had fought so hard to keep. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the desert breeze. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Rosa asked Isaac one evening. "If you had not been in that store that day, if you had not stood up to Vernon." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his hand finding hers automatically. "I try not to think about it," he admitted. "The idea of you facing all that alone, or worse, losing to Vernon, it makes my blood run cold. I am just grateful I was there." "I am grateful too," Rosa said softly, "for so many things. For your courage that day, for your love every day since, for the life we built together and the family we created, for every sunrise we have watched together and every challenge we have overcome side by side." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We have had a good life, Rosa Bennett." "The best life," Rosa agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Rosa felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. The girl who had run through the streets of Fort Bowie in terror, who had thought she might lose everything, had instead gained more than she ever dreamed possible. She had kept her father's legacy, yes, but more importantly, she had found love and partnership and a family that filled her days with joy. And it had all started with a cowboy who stood between her and a man who tried to claim her as property, who said two simple words that changed everything. "Try it." Those words had been a challenge and a promise, a line drawn in the sand that said this far and no further. They had been the beginning of everything, the moment when Isaac Bennett had stepped into her life and refused to leave, the moment when Rosa had realized she did not have to face the world alone. Years later, when Rosa was very old and her children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate her 80th birthday, they asked her to share the story of how she and Isaac had met. Rosa told the tale she had told so many times before, about the confrontation in the general store, about Isaac's intervention, about the fight for her ranch and the marriage that saved it. But then she added something she did not always include, looking around at the faces of her descendants, at the legacy she and Isaac had built together. "The most important thing I learned," Rosa said, her voice still strong despite her age, "is that sometimes love comes when you least expect it, in the middle of crisis and fear. And sometimes the person who stands beside you in your darkest moment becomes the person who lights up all your days after. Your grandfather did not just save my ranch that day, he saved me. And together we built something that will last long after we are both gone. Isaac, now an old man, but still with those same gray eyes that had captured Rosa's heart so long ago, squeezed her hand. Best decision I ever made, he said simply, stepping between you and Vernon, getting to love you for all these years. Rosa smiled at him, seeing past the wrinkles and the gray hair to the young cowboy who had said, "Try it," with such absolute conviction. Best decision I ever made was saying yes when you asked me to marry you. Even though the circumstances were rushed, one of their granddaughters asked. Especially because the circumstances were rushed, Rosa said firmly. It taught me that sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Sometimes you have to trust your heart even when your head is telling you to be cautious. Isaac and I could have waited, could have courted for months or years before marrying. But we did not have that luxury. And you know what? I am glad, because every single day of our marriage has been a gift, and I would not trade a single one of them for anything. Isaac raised his glass. To taking chances, he said, and to the woman brave enough to fight for what was hers and wise enough to let me help. To taking chances, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Rosa looked around at the gathered family, at the children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren who carried both her blood and Isaac's. She thought about the ranch that still thrived under Thomas's management, about Clara's successful spread, about James's law practice that helped people protect their rights. She thought about all the laughter and tears, all the hard times and good times, all the ordinary moments that had added up to an extraordinary life. And she knew, with the certainty that comes from a life well lived, that every struggle had been worth it. Vernon had tried to claim her as property, to reduce her to something he could own and control. But Isaac had stood between them and dared him to try. And from that act of courage and defiance had grown a love story that spanned decades, a partnership that had weathered every storm, and a legacy that would continue for generations to come. As the celebration continued around her, Rosa closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for her father, who had raised her to be strong, for Isaac, who had loved her fiercely and faithfully, for the land that had sustained them, and for the life they had built together one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one moment of love at a time. It had all started with 2 words, try it. And those 2 words had led to everything that mattered, to love and family, to struggle and triumph, to a life rich with meaning and purpose. Rosa Bennett, who had once been Rosa Lawson, who had once been a frightened young woman facing the loss of everything, had instead found everything she never knew she needed. And she had found it standing beside a cowboy who refused to let injustice stand, who saw her not as property to be claimed, but as a person to be cherished, who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. That was the real story, Rosa thought, not just about saving a ranch or defeating a villain, but about finding love in unexpected places, about the courage it takes to trust another person with your heart, about building something lasting and beautiful out of crisis and chaos. As the sun set on her 80th birthday, surrounded by the family she and Isaac had created, Rosa felt nothing but peace and joy. Their story had started with conflict and fear, but it had become something beautiful. It had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of standing up for what is right and the magic that can happen when 2 people choose to face the world together. And it all came back to that moment, that pivotal instant when Isaac Bennett had stepped between her and her uncle and said those 2 perfect words, try it. The challenge that became a promise, the promise that became a life.